Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. And we're back after another couple of weeks off. Sorry I missed you last week, Steve. I was back in Adelaide, but sadly couldn't make the schedules work. But we're back again, ready to do another right round of topics. And just wanted to kick off with the fact that I picked up a Fitbit. I know a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, whenever it was, I made a crack about I'd never wear a watch, but I think that was in lieu of in discussion of the Apple Watch. This I'm sort of testing to see what the fitness tracking's like because it was kind of a nominal cost to get into it, and I'm just curious to see what the experience is like. I think I had a Fitbit about 10 years ago, and obviously it's got a lot more functionality than what I had before, but you know, I still want to see if it's worth the effort and whatnot.
Well, very good. Good luck with that. I hope they do perform better than the Fitbits did for certainly a lot of people. A lot of them didn't work that well out of the box. For my own personal plug, I've got a Coros Pace 2, great watch and really good company, actually, you know, in terms of innovation and providing an excellent product. So, if anyone wants to go, you know, a little bit higher up the chain, yourself included, Ben, I highly recommend it.
Absolutely, we'll definitely have to check it out. All right, we're going to do a bit of a sway of topics today, or whatever we can fit into our allotted time slot here. Obviously, big weekend last weekend with the federal election, and I actually did want to. Obviously, it was a change election, although a change election that was rather different, I think, compared to some of the old ones in the past. I did want to start with the polls because there was such a big deal made in 2019 that the pollsters got it wrong. They seem to have gotten a little bit more right. I'm just having a look at the ABC latest results page, and it seems like that it was at 51.6 to 48.4 two-party preferred, and I believe News Poll was 53.47. I guess that's within the margin of error, roughly. Certainly a lot better result than 2019 would suggest. Although, in digging into the numbers, it would seem that they still missed the, I don't know, what would you call it? The voter that falls out of their usual sample. Like, why was there so many votes for independents or minor parties? Like, it was a huge vote this time. For that, which is represented with the amount of seats in the House of Reps that are dedicated to, you know, candidates that are not part of the major parties.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, really the big surprise were the Teal Independence, and there's been a lot written on that, which I think people can research themselves. But they're primarily they had their three issues. And they resonated, and there were three issues that I think the incumbent government weren't willing to address. And I think you saw those swings in seats that were traditionally, I guess, Liberal seats. So I think that's going to change the face of politics moving forward. I think, you know, issues now are changing away from the traditional, maybe, you know, purely economic or, you know, purely best leadership to people that will take action on issues and predominantly social issues too.
And I guess only time will tell, I guess maybe over the course of the next election or two or three, as to whether or not this is a permanent change to the political landscape in Australia. We've historically had just the two major parties and, you know, they'd seesaw between each other. But this election yielded a result which was probably, well, obviously it's nowhere near the same, but it's kind of along the same lines as what you might have expected in a European parliament, where there's a little bit more diversity going on in terms of representation. And it may be that that's where Australia's going. I mean, you know, it's a generational change. You'd expect at some point, you know, newer generations were going to influence that sort of outcome, and maybe maybe this is the beginning and the end of two-party, you know, major two-party dominance.
Well, if it leads to a more diverse parliament, it's probably a good thing. So I'm not sure how it will play out because really a lot of the policies are very similar between, you know, a number of those parties, but we'll see how that plays out.
Absolutely. All right, let's sidestep to the dreaded monkeypox. I don't want to have to get into how the media. Maybe this is something a continuous thing, us just whinging about the media coverage. But not to say that it's not concerning. It's just the fact that they just jumped all over it as the latest thing that we need to be concerned about. Obviously, it's, I guess, noteworthy from the perspective that it typically is not a virus that would be spreading in the way that it is. But I think there's also a sense of how much are they overdoing the coverage of that sort of spread. I mean, maybe it's good from an information point of view to sort of highlight to people that these things are happening. Obviously, it wouldn't be nice if you get it, but at the same time, sorry, I keep bringing it back to the media. As soon as that first flashed up on the screen, it was like, yep, let's go sensationalize. Yep, let's do it. Straight into it. COVID's over. We got to get the next one in.
Well, that's right. And, there's heightened sensitivity around, all sorts of disease and ailment at the moment. If it's not COVID, it's going to be flus and colds that are going to kill us. And if monkeypox is there as well, let's write a story on it. I mean, it's got a great name, monkey. That gets everyone's attention right there. And pox, well, put the two together, you've got clickbait.
Yeah, exactly. And also just to highlight that it wouldn't have gotten the coverage pre-pandemic. I'm guessing it wouldn't have. I'd probably put money on that, or even though there's no real way to know. But anyway, it was interesting to see how that came out. All right, let's move along again. Something completely different again. Just this story caught my eye because I've sort of in the back of my mind I've always been curious as to how would you call it, the food industry or us as a society solve the problem of delivering food like meat to millions and millions and billions of more people that want to consume it. And this idea of a 4-story bioreactor designed and built in the US to cultivate meat and other animal products, I thought was really interesting. It sounded like a very science fiction idea, but then something that could practically occur.
Well, look, I'm going to draw a long bow, but I connect this to, the generational change we're seeing in politics, around social issues. And there are people that feel that growing meat in traditional ways is no longer really acceptable, either from a, animal well-being perspective and also from a climate perspective. Now, whether or not they're right or wrong won't change their attitude. And I think what we're seeing here is the technology's there now to create an artificial style of meat. Bioreactors are how you do it, and you can probably create an entire process that effectively will turn out to be more sustainable than raising animals for meat. And I think that this is really interesting because this is a generational change. And if people demand it and there's enough demand for this to be commercially viable, then it'll become a thing. And once it becomes a thing, it'll sweep through in a generational change. So we may be saying, there's 30 years left of meat from livestock.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And very much the stuff of what we would have grown up on as sort of out there, like as in a science fiction idea, almost to the point of not that it's a Star Trek replicator, but it's kind of maybe a little bit like that in the sense that it's being grown from those non-traditional means.
Well, I think the part of the generational changes is that maybe 30 years ago, nobody would have touched it because it was artificial. But now those same people that in that demographic that wouldn't have touched it because it was artificial will touch it because it's artificial. And that just goes to show you how attitudes change. And when they do, you get a generational shift.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on. And our last two topics for today are to do with tech. One with Apple, one with Microsoft. And there's this first one about the iPhone 14 Max being delayed by 3 weeks due to COVID lockdowns in China. Wasn't exactly hard to predict, shall we say, given the troubles over there in China with lockdowns, etc.
Yeah, or particularly like saddening. like compared to some of the other things that are going on in the world either. If we have to wait a few more months for the iPhone 14, that's we will.
It was like that video that was posted about all the workers in the factories jumping the lines just to get out of the factory because they were forced to stay in there for the lockdown. It's just horrendous. And it's like, oh no, I'm not going to get my iPhone on time. And it's like, well, it's all right. You can use your current one for a little while longer. The interesting thing, and maybe this goes to maybe Apple's sort of uber control of their supply chain, is that it appears to only be one of the 4 new models that is actually going to be delayed. So the 14 Max is apparently the new version, that new design that hasn't been released before, replacing the mini phone effectively. And because it's a new design, they have to, obviously have a new process installed for that. And that's what has caused the delay. But the other 3 models, the regular 14 and the 2 Pro models, no problem. They can just keep punching it out. I actually find maybe that's the Tim Cook effect. I know he's got the background in logistics and whatever. It is impressive that they can weather some of those storms, and even that also extends to things like having all their chips available to them, etc.
Well, that's the thing about Apple. They've always been well organised, and they've got a culture of knowing what they're capable of. And when they do, they execute it usually pretty well. I'll be very interested to see just how different the iPhone 14 is. Hopefully it weighs about half of the weight of the 13.
Well, I'm hoping actually the one bit that I did hear was that potentially might be made out, well, the Pro models anyway, might be made out of titanium. So that might lighten the load a little bit, but compared to the stainless steel they're using now. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see what's released. One caveat, of course, on the supply chain stuff, they are actually affected. I don't know if you've gone on the Apple Store recently, but just about everything is hard to get, or will take weeks to get out, weeks or months to get out to you. So it's not as if they're not affected as well. Which leads us to our last story, Microsoft's Project Volterra, a mini PC for ARM developers. Now, this caught my attention straight away because as soon as I saw the sort of the advertising video that Microsoft put out for it, I thought, oh, it's a Mac Mini. But then, which apparently was a joke going around the internet anyway. A lot of people thought that that's what was going on, sort of the copying what Apple had done with the M1 chip, etc. If this is going to have a neural processing unit in it and all of that jazz. But what I thought was really odd about this, and this is only something that I think Microsoft can do, is they create a platform, which they need to do. They need to get on the ARM train because sort of Apple's sort of taken off on it, and it's a natural extension that if Microsoft adopts it, then there can be more mainstream adoption of ARM chips in standard PCs, which still make up the majority of the PCs out there. They'd have to develop one that can only be used by developers. Nice in theory, but what's the point of a developer purchasing one of these to develop on it when nobody else can buy it or have access to it to then use the apps that these developers are making? That to me seems like a wonderfully Microsoft way of going about it.
Well, I'm sure the Microsoft sales team has sat down, done their research, and found there's a market segment for this product, and that's why they're making it. Maybe they haven't explored the use case quite carefully enough, but I'm sure there's a market segment that exists. Whether or not they'll be able to sell into that market segment, we'll have to wait and see. And it'll want to be pretty good, I think, is the other thing that you'd have to say about this. I mean, Snapdragon make great chips for phones, but they do tend to run a little bit hot, which suggests they're not super efficient. So it'll be interesting once again to see what sort of product they come up with.
Hopefully a little more efficient than the Intel chips, even though Intel is trying to catch up, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing I did want to mention on it is that maybe, to be fair, hopefully, and maybe this is me if I was doing it, if there was a way to really, get everyone excited, would be coming out and saying that they're going to transform their Surface line to be all ARM based and sort of lead the pack that way with their laptops and all of that. If they actually did that, I think then potentially that might actually catch on.
Well, in Microsoft's sort of history, they'll probably try this product first, and then that's probably exactly where they're targeted. It'll be the Surface range eventually, and then, wow, they'll almost have copied Apple.
Just a couple of years later, unfortunately. Still interesting, and despite my barbs at Microsoft, I do still use both platforms regularly. And yes, there are, I can see where the use cases are for both of them. And I personally want, as much as I love the M1 Mac and all the M1, or everything Apple's doing, I do want to see something happening on the Windows side as well, because ultimately there's a whole much vaster user base, larger user base that uses their products, will never use a Mac, and I think they need to get on the bandwagon with this sooner rather than later.
Well, yeah, product development, they've just got to make better products, and I guess everyone in the PC industry has achieved that by different measures over the years. So, but you're absolutely right. We need to see more evolution in general and realize that things are changing. We're really moving to mobile devices. Laptops now are truly mobile, not just something you can take with you. And they need new features, they need new functions, and the next generation of users are using these devices differently. So they need to become more efficient and more user-friendly.
Absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there with our vast range of swath of topics today within our allotted time slot. Interesting times. We'll just have to make sure that we don't catch monkeypox and we eat bioreactor meat at some point.
Definitely, those two things are both on my list, not catching monkeypox and probably tucking into one of these synthetic burgers,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again for listening to us in this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. You can catch us, all of our details, at SciTechCulture.com. Subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels from there, and check out all of our other content on there. We greatly appreciate it. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.